Thanks, Helen. Well, hi everyone. And yeah, I promise you, I didn't put Michael up to that, but I think it's true. So I didn't invent the concept of CBDC. I can't claim that, which is just as well because I don't want to go down in history as the inventor of the meat ration. But I think I may well be the first person who put those four words together. And that was actually what I wanted to talk about in the last 10 minutes, while I stand between you and a drink. And it was the importance of knowing that we're solving the right problem. And how do you know you're solving the right problem when the solution lies in the future? So I guess this ties in very tightly, not only with the last point, but the themes that we've been hearing throughout this session. So what I thought I'd do was go back to that original blog post from just over 9 years ago, where I think I coined that phrase, and talk about what I thought the problem was to which CBDC was a solution, because it's not what we're talking about today, because I got it completely wrong. So back to this point about solving the right problem. So what did I think the problem was? What was the proposed solution? And then what has turned out to be the set of problems for which CBDC might be the solution? So that's what I'll try and cover in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So in prep for this, I did go back to that blog post to try and remind myself what problem I thought I was solving. And this was back in early 2015. So this is, Bitcoin's around, but Ethereum hasn't even launched at this point. But there was a lot of talk about smart contracts. So the first thing that stood out at me was this was entirely in the permissionless crypto space. That was the thought process that was going on back then. And the thought experiment, it was really quite a simple one, was let's imagine that regulated finance moves to a public blockchain. So it was a thought experiment. Let's imagine that happens. And I just thought through a really simple example of perhaps we move like an insurance company or an insurance contract into a smart contract. So you've got this. So again, it's very stylized, very very hypothetical. You end up with this smart contract that is supporting a market where you've got providers of capacity and then you've got people who are taking out insurance policies. How would that actually work? Well, the first observation was they'd probably very rapidly want to use real-world currencies. So this predates stablecoins, of course. So you'd want to put pounds or dollars or euros into it. So that was point one. But then the second point was, well, how is that actually going to work? You might have Barclays pounds, Lloyd's pounds, HSBC pounds. You can have all these different types of money going in, which are, they're similar, but they're not equivalent. A Lloyd's pound, as we've heard many times today, is not the same as a Barclays pound. So you're going to end up with the treasury of this smart contract full of all these different types of pounds and euros and dollars. And then as and when you come to get a payout, perhaps you send in like a signed proof from an oracle or something that a weather event has happened and therefore you're entitled to your cash. You'd expect some payout. But if you paid your premium in Lloyd's pounds, but everybody else is paid in HSBC pounds, suddenly you're paid in HSBC pounds. You've got no relationship with them. What are you supposed to do? So the thought process was no more sophisticated than the idea that we probably just need a common form of each currency that is high quality, trusted by everybody, that solves that problem of all these competing, not quite the same currencies. So the thought process was, well, if we had a digital currency that was issued by the central bank, suddenly the whole permissionless world will become much easier. Now, of course, that's not how it turned out. That problem turned out to be solved completely differently by the private sector, by what became known as stable coins. And interestingly, they solved the problem of having a cash-like, reasonably high-quality asset that isn't a crypto asset. They haven't actually yet solved the problem of the fact that USDC and USDT aren't quite the same, but people don't seem to care. So the initial thought, at least the one that drove the creation of that term, didn't lead to it didn't solve the problem that we thought it would. But what has happened since is we've seen the emergence, and now we go over to my world, you see the emergence in the permissioned world of a whole bunch of permissioned digital asset networks. And I'll talk about retail in a sec. So we've got all these wholesale digital asset networks. And they too have not played out as I expected. So when we were speaking as R3 CTO, when we were designing Corda, we assumed the permissioned world would play out just like the permissionless. There's one Ethereum network, there's one Bitcoin network. So we thought there would be one large Corda network, maybe one large Hyperledger network, maybe one large digital asset network. So that's how we designed the platform. That's how we assumed it would play out. What actually happened was each of these networks is separate. So I won't name our clients, but each of the major users of these permission networks has their own network. So you've got this fragmentation, if you like, where each of these platforms is separate. So you then get to the primary point of this talk and this session, which is, okay, that's fine on the digital asset side, but they still need to settle. So we then move back into this problem of what problem does or might a CBDC solve. They need a high quality asset in which to settle. As we've heard several times today, they want one that works 24/7. but they couldn't possibly deal with the fragmentation of having a high quality asset issued to each and every one of them. Managing that liquidity would be a complete nightmare. And so that leads to, I guess, where we are today. And I guess there's almost a fork in the road for the if you like, the institutional permission networks, which is either all these networks need to consolidate, so there's a smaller number of these networks, and that might happen with some of the interoperability and some of the unified ledger things that are happening, or we need a generally accepted place where the liquidity is consolidated. So either either on one side we converge the networks, or we concentrate the liquidity in one place. And we've heard it mentioned in several times already, but something like finality may turn out to be the answer. So we've got finality in the UK, maybe there'll be equivalents elsewhere. So one of the questions I'm asking about where we go in the future is how we deal with this fragmentation in the permissioned world. And the answer is either the consolidation of the networks, or it's the concentration of liquidity in one place that everybody interoperates with. So back to that question about knowing that we're solving the right problem. We're not using CBDC to solve the permissionless crypto smart contract problem. Stablecoins have solved that, but having a high quality CBDC or synthetic CBDC in a single place could be the solution to the problem of how we settle all these transactions across the digital asset networks that are emerging on Corda and elsewhere. And then finally, if I look at what I'm seeing on the retail side, imagine that the digital pound does get issued. What world will the Bank of England be facing when that happens? We've got stable coins, we've got existing commercial bank deposits, we've got open banking as a way of exposing those things, we've got potentially tokenized deposits. We'll have a huge diversity of types of money, tokenized or not, issuers of money, central bank or commercial bank. There's huge diversity, and yet somehow consumers and merchants have to make sense of it. So for my money, and of course I would say this because we were involved along Quant, DXC, EY and others, but the UK RLM project, the experimentation phase that culminated a few weeks ago, really is worth paying attention to. I don't think it's yet had the attention it deserved, because what it tried to do was multiple things, maybe too many things, which is why people haven't fully understood it. It tried to ask the question of how could you tokenize lots of different commercial bank deposits. But it also said, if we've got this hugely diverse, fragmented world of different types of retail money, how can we, well, the question is, can we put an API over the top of it all that makes it seamlessly consistent from the perspective of the users and the merchants? But can we do that in a way that doesn't just drive us to the lowest common denominator? Because, of course, it would be easy to put an API over lots of different forms of retail money by just saying this API just gives you the bare minimum of what everybody gives. But as Martin mentioned this morning in his fireside chat, what we actually did was say, can we provide an API that provides a superset of all the functionality? So that if there's a feature that one form of money offers, perhaps locking in tokenized deposits, can we simulate that or otherwise implement it for forms of money that don't have it to upgrade their capabilities so that a rising tide lifts all boats rather than taking everyone down to the lowest common denominator? So in many ways, the problem with the retail CBDC isn't the CBDC itself, it's the way it's forcing us to think about how we deal with this fragmentation of forms of money from the perspective of consumers and merchants. So yeah, so it's 9 years, I guess, since the term was first coined, but of course people were talking about the concept before that. But I guess one thing I've learned along that journey is, I was going to say, this is like, I'm going to steal, I'm going to mangle this phrase now, it's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future. But what I've found about that in a different angle is you might not be able to predict the future, but if you're actually helping create it, you get a lot more influence. So it's been sort of like great to be here for most of today, because it just feels like the people in this room are the people who are actually making this happen, whether people are sort of investing in it, driving it, the actual future's being defined here. We're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it. So it's been super exciting to be here all day. Thanks for having us. Thanks for allowing R3 to sponsor it. And I'll hand back, and thanks everyone. Cheers.